young doctor with nothing but dreams and determination saves the world's wealthiest man from the brink of death, only to find herself thrust into the most dangerous and life-changing moment of her career. But when fate calls again, will she be able to save him once more, or will this be the moment she loses everything? The clock is ticking and the stakes have never been higher. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. Leela Patel stood on the rooftop of her small home in the village of Gujarat, gazing up at the night sky. The stars twinkled above her, as if they were lighting the path to her dreams. Born in a family that had always struggled to make ends meet, Leela knew that the road ahead would not be easy. But the fire inside her, the desire to become a doctor, burned brighter than any challenge that life threw her way. Her father, a hard-working tailor, spent long hours stitching clothes for the village. His hands, though skilled, were rough from years of labor. Leela's mother, who worked as a maid, would often return home late at night, exhausted from cleaning other people's homes. Despite the tireless efforts of her parents, money was always scarce, and dreams seemed like something reserved for others. Yet, in their tiny house, surrounded by love and warmth, Leela's heart was full of hope. As a young girl, Leela often sat beside her father while he worked. She would watch him carefully as he guided the needle through fabric, stitching one piece at a time. In those moments, Leela would pretend that she was holding a scalpel, not a needle, and that she was stitching lives together, not just clothes. She imagined herself in a grand hospital, surrounded by the latest medical equipment, saving lives and making a difference in the world. But reality was harsh. Education required money, and her family had barely enough to feed themselves. Leela's parents wanted the best for their daughter, but they knew their financial limitations. Even though they had little, they supported her dream. Every evening when the sun set and the house was dark, Leela would study under the flickering glow of a street lamp, which was the only light she had after the power went out. She borrowed books from her teacher and studied hard, determined not to let anything stand in her way. She was often exhausted after a long day of school and work around the house. But Leela never complained. She believed that her dream of becoming a doctor was worth every sacrifice. Her intelligence shone like a beacon, even though she had little resources. Her teachers saw her potential, and they encouraged her to keep going, to keep believing in herself. At the age of 16, Leela's perseverance paid off. She won a national scholarship that would allow her to attend one of the most prestigious medical schools in the United States. It was a turning point in her life, the moment that would set her on a path toward becoming the doctor she had always dreamed of. But even with the scholarship, there were challenges ahead. Leela was far from home, alone in a foreign country with no family to rely on. She struggled with homesickness and often felt like an outsider among her classmates. The language barrier was another obstacle she had to overcome, but Leela never let these challenges hold her back. She worked harder than anyone else, determined to prove that she belonged. As she immersed herself in the world of medicine, Leela's dedication and passion stood out. She worked long hours, studying late into the night and practicing her skills. She was driven not just by the desire to succeed, but by the belief that she could make a difference in the world. Every time she put on her white coat, she felt like she was one step closer to her dream. She was no longer the girl who had studied under streetlights. She was becoming a doctor. But there were moments when self-doubt crept in. There were times when Leela questioned whether she could ever reach the top, whether she could overcome the barriers that still stood in her way. Her classmates came from privileged backgrounds, and she often felt like she was fighting an uphill battle. However, each time doubt crossed her mind, Leela remembered the sacrifices her parents had made for her, the long nights of studying by the dim light of a street lamp, and the dream she had held onto since childhood. Those memories fueled her resolve. One night during her final year of medical school, Leela's dedication was tested in a way she had never imagined. As she was leaving the hospital after a grueling shift, she noticed a man clutching his chest near the entrance. His face was pale and his breath came in gasps. Without a moment's hesitation, Leela rushed to his side, her medical training kicking in. She pressed 2 fingers to his pulse, feeling the weak, erratic beats. Her heart raced as she realized what was happening. A heart attack. Without thinking, Lila dropped to her knees and began CPR. The seconds felt like hours as she worked, her hands moving with practiced precision. The crowd that had gathered around them whispered in shock, but Lila was focused. Her only thought was to save this man's life. She knew that the odds were against her, but she couldn't let him die. She pressed on, her hands moving faster, her focus unwavering. It wasn't until the paramedics arrived and took over that Lila finally had a moment to look up. And that's when she saw the man's face. It was Victor Belmont, the billionaire tech mogul, the richest man in the world. Shocked, Lila realized that she had just saved the life of the very man whose innovations had changed the world. It was an unforgettable moment, and it confirmed what Lila had always believed. She was meant to be a doctor. For Lila, saving Victor's life was just another confirmation that she was on the right path. She had proven to herself that no matter where she came from or how many obstacles stood in her way, she had the skills, the passion, and the drive to make her dreams come true. This was just the beginning of a journey that would change the course of her life forever. And as Lila watched Victor being taken to safety, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She wasn't just a young girl from a small village anymore. She was a doctor, and she had just saved the world's richest man. The night was chilly as Lila Patel stepped out of the bustling hospital in New York, her mind still racing from the long hours she had spent studying and observing surgeries. It was late and the streets were quiet, with only a few people walking by in the distance. Lila had just finished another exhausting shift and was heading home, hoping to get a few hours of rest before returning the next day. She had always been dedicated to her studies, often spending late nights at the hospital, shadowing the best surgeons, learning as much as she could. But tonight her life was about to take an unexpected turn. As she walked towards the entrance of the hospital, she noticed a man stumbling near the front steps. His face was pale, his body trembling as he gasped for breath. Lila's instincts kicked in immediately. She rushed towards him, recognizing the signs of a heart attack. She had seen it many times before, but this time it was different. The man was struggling to stay conscious, and there was a look of panic in his eyes. "Sir, can you hear me?" Lila asked, crouching down beside him. She quickly pressed 2 fingers to his wrist, checking for a pulse. It was weak and erratic, the kind of pulse that told her time was running out. She felt a rush of urgency surge through her. There was no time to waste. Without hesitation, Lila dropped to her knees and began administering CPR. She knew what needed to be done. Her hands moved quickly and precisely, pressing down firmly on his chest, breathing air into his lungs. She could hear the soft murmur of people gathering around, but she didn't pay attention to them. Her focus was entirely on the man in front of her. Every second counted, and she wasn't going to let him die if she could help it. Minutes felt like hours as Lila continued the life-saving process. Her arms were beginning to ache, but she pushed through the pain, determined not to stop until help arrived. The sounds of the city seemed to fade away, and all that mattered was the man in front of her. She felt his body shudder beneath her hands, and with every beat of his fragile heart, she held on to the hope that he would survive. Finally, she heard the sirens of the paramedics approaching in the distance. It was a sound that filled her with relief, but even then, she couldn't let her guard down. She glanced up at the man's face, seeing the desperation in his eyes. His breath was shallow, but he was still alive. As the paramedics rushed over and took over, Lila took a step back, her chest heaving with exhaustion. She had done all she could, and now it was in their hands. As the paramedics worked to stabilize him, Lila stood to the side, catching her breath. She felt a strange mix of emotions, relief that the man was still alive, but also a sense of awe at how close they had come to losing him. She had done it. She had saved his life. But there was something about the situation that felt surreal, as though she had stepped into a world that was far beyond her. It wasn't until the paramedics were about to load the man into the ambulance that Lila finally looked at his face more closely. And that's when the world seemed to stop. The man, still weak and barely conscious, opened his eyes and locked gazes with her. Lila's breath caught in her throat as she recognized him. It was Victor Belmont, the billionaire tech mogul, the man whose name was known worldwide. He was the founder of one of the largest tech companies, the man whose innovations had changed the way the world operated. Lila had seen his face on TV countless times, admired his brilliance from afar, but never in her wildest dreams did she imagine she would be saving his life on a quiet night in New York. She stood frozen for a moment, unable to believe what she had just done. She had just saved the world's richest man, but there was no time to dwell on the shock. The paramedics moved quickly, and Lila stepped back to allow them to do their work. The night air seemed to feel colder as Lila stood there trying to process what had just happened. She had been so focused on saving him that she hadn't thought much about who he was. But now, standing there in the dim light of the street, it felt like everything had changed. She had never expected this, never imagined that one day she would find herself face to face with Victor Belmont, the man who had revolutionized the tech industry, the man whose influence reached every corner of the world. As the ambulance pulled away, Lila stood in the quiet of the night, a mix of emotions swirling within her. She had saved a life, but not just any life, a life that would change the course of her own future. Lila had always dreamed of making a difference, of saving lives and being recognized for her contributions to medicine. But this encounter was different. She hadn't saved him for fame or recognition. She had saved him because that was her calling. And in that moment, Lila realized that the path she was on was leading her toward something much greater than she had ever imagined. The next few days were a blur. The news outlets reported the incident, calling it a miracle that Victor Belmont had been saved by a young medical student. But for Lila, the attention didn't matter. What mattered was that she had done what she was meant to do, save lives. And as the days passed, Lila couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? Would this encounter lead to something more? She had no answers, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand. And so, as she returned to her studies, Lila felt a sense of purpose and anticipation growing inside her. The future, once uncertain and far away, now seemed closer than ever before. It was a dark and stormy evening when Lila Patel received the call. The urgency in the voice on the other end of the line was unmistakable. It was from the hospital. "Dr. Patel, it's Mr. Belmont. He's in critical condition. We need you immediately." Lila's heart skipped a beat as the name echoed in her ears. Victor Belmont, the man whose life she had saved years ago, now needed her again. But this time, it was different. This time, the stakes were higher. Victor had suffered an aortic dissection, a condition where the main artery in the body tears, causing blood to flood the chest cavity. The rupture was rapidly worsening, and the doctors were losing him. Lila felt a cold shiver run down her spine as the gravity of the situation settled in. This was a life-and-death moment, and there was no time to waste. She quickly threw on her jacket and grabbed her medical bag, her mind racing with thoughts of what she had learned in her years of training. As she made her way to the hospital, every second felt like an eternity. The storm outside seemed to mirror the chaos inside her mind. How could this be happening? How could the man she had once saved, the man who had made such an impact on the world, be on the verge of death again? Lila's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly and her thoughts turned to the surgery ahead. When Lila arrived at the hospital, the scene in the operating room was like something out of a nightmare. The sterile lights above the surgical table flickered and the room buzzed with tense energy. The lead surgeon, a man named Dr. Turner, was frantically trying to stabilize Victor, but his efforts seemed to be in vain. Lila could see the panic in the eyes of the other doctors as they worked on Victor, their hands trembling with the weight of the situation. His pulse was weak, and the blood in his chest was rising quickly. Time was running out. "Dr. Patel, we need your help," Dr. Turner said, his voice tight with frustration. He turned to face her, his expression one of helplessness. "We've tried everything. The dissection is spreading and we can't control the bleeding. If we don't do something fast, He won't make it. Lila felt a wave of responsibility wash over her. She knew that all eyes were on her, and the pressure was mounting. But she also knew that she couldn't back down now. This was her moment to prove everything she had worked for. She couldn't let Victor, or anyone else for that matter, slip away because of fear or doubt. She quickly scanned the situation in the room, her mind whirling with possibilities. Then, it hit her. A flash of inspiration. The procedure that had been used for years to repair an aortic dissection was standard, but it was not enough. It was a traditional approach, and the risks were high. But what if there was another way? What if she could use the cutting-edge technique she had been developing, the one she had spent countless hours perfecting during her late-night studies? It was risky, untested in a case like this, but it was her only option. If it worked, she could save Victor's life. If it didn't, they would lose him forever. Without a moment's hesitation, Lila stepped forward, her voice calm but determined. "I have an idea," she said, "but it's going to be a high-risk move. If it fails, we won't have another chance." Dr. Turner looked at her, uncertainty written across his face. But then he nodded. "Do it. We have nothing to lose." Lila immediately set to work, her hands moving with the practiced skill of someone who had honed her craft over years of dedication. She instructed the team to prepare for a revolutionary microstent procedure, one that would allow her to repair the tear using a minimally invasive approach. The room fell silent as everyone watched Lila. This was not something that had been done before. It was a gamble, but Lila believed it was the only way. As she made the delicate incision, she felt a sense of focus and clarity she had never experienced before. Every movement was precise, every decision calculated. Her mind was fully engaged in the task at hand, and nothing else mattered. She was in the zone, and for the first time since she had walked into the room, she felt like she had control of the situation. The procedure was incredibly delicate. Lila carefully navigated through the fragile arteries, using tools that had never been used in this type of surgery. The team watched in awe as she worked with breathtaking skill, her hands steady despite the pressure. Seconds turned into minutes, and each one felt like an eternity. Lila's mind raced, but she remained calm. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, Lila finally saw the moment of truth. She had successfully placed the micro-stent in the artery, sealing the tear and preventing further blood loss. Slowly, cautiously, she looked at Victor's vital signs. His pulse was stabilizing. The color was returning to his face. The room erupted in disbelief and relief as the monitor beeped steadily, confirming that Victor had been saved. Lila exhaled deeply, her body finally relaxing after what had been a long and harrowing ordeal. The team cheered, and Dr. Turner clapped her on the back, a look of awe in his eyes. "You did it, Dr. Patel," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Lila stood there, her hands trembling slightly from the effort. She had done it. Against all odds, she had saved Victor Belmont's life once again. She had taken a risk, pushed the boundaries of conventional medicine, and it had paid off. In that moment, Lila knew that her life had changed forever. She had proven to herself and to the world that she was more than just a medical student. She was a revolutionary surgeon, capable of changing the course of history. As the team continued to celebrate, Lila glanced down at Victor, still unconscious but now stable. His journey was far from over, but for the first time in what felt like forever, Lila felt a sense of peace. She had done what she had always dreamed of. She had saved a life. And this time, it was her own future that had been forever changed. The key. Days after the surgery passed in a blur of excitement and exhaustion, Lila Patel had done the impossible. She had saved the life of Victor Belmont, the world's wealthiest man, with a procedure so risky and innovative that no one else would have dared to try it. She had defied the odds, and in doing so, had proven not only her skill but her unwavering belief in the power of medical science. As she sat in her small office at the hospital, the phone on her desk rang. She picked it up, still feeling the weight of the previous few days. The voice, on the other end, was familiar, but this time it carried a different tone. "Dr. Patel, it's Victor Belmont. Can you meet me in my office?" Her heart skipped a beat. Victor Belmont, the man whose life she had saved, was calling her. The same man who had been unconscious and fighting for his life just days before. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. This could mean anything. Thank you, a donation, or maybe a new opportunity. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew it was something important. When Lila arrived at the office building, she was escorted to a private elevator that took her to the top floor. As the doors opened, she was greeted by a view of the city that stretched far beyond the horizon. The office was sleek and modern, with glass walls and minimalist design. And there, sitting behind a large desk, was Victor Belmont. His expression, thoughtful but warm. "Dr. Patel," he said as he stood up, extending his hand. "Please have a seat." Lila sat down, still unsure of what was happening. Victor smiled at her, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that she couldn't ignore. "You've saved my life," Victor began, his voice steady. "And for that, I am forever grateful. But what you've done for me goes beyond just saving my life. What you've done is change the course of my future. And for that, I owe you more than just thanks." Lila was taken aback. She had never expected anything more than a simple thank you. But she quickly realized that Victor's gratitude was sincere and deep. He continued speaking, and as he did, Lila's heart raced. "I've been thinking a lot about my life and my legacy," he said. "I've spent so much time building companies, making money, and changing the world in my own way. But I realize now that I've neglected something important. People. The world needs more than just technological advancements. It needs compassion. It needs care, and it needs doctors like you." Victor paused for a moment as if weighing his words carefully. Then he made an offer that would change Lila's life forever. "I want to make a donation, a large one. Not just to you, but in your name. I want to help fund hospitals and medical research programs in underprivileged communities around the world. I believe that everyone should have access to the kind of care you provided me with. Innovative, compassionate, and life-saving." Lila's eyes widened. She had never expected something like this. A donation, a legacy in her name. It was more than she could have imagined. But it wasn't the money that moved her. It was the idea that her work, her passion, could help others. It could change the lives of people who had never even had the chance to dream of a better future. Victor's voice softened as he added, "This is just the beginning. I want to partner with you, to support you in whatever you need to continue your work. You've changed my life, Lila, and now I want to help you change the world." In that moment, Lila realized that her life had taken a turn she had never expected. It was no longer just about her dreams and aspirations. It was about something much bigger, making a difference on a global scale. She wasn't just a doctor anymore. She was a beacon of hope, someone who had the power to create real change. Victor Belmont's generosity was overwhelming, but Lila knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would take her to places she had never imagined. Her work in heart surgery had already revolutionized the field, but now she had the resources and the platform to take her ideas further, to create programs that would bring medical care to the world's most vulnerable populations. As Lila left Victor's office that day, she felt a sense of clarity and purpose that she had never experienced before. She wasn't just a survivor of her circumstances. She was a force for good, a woman with the ability to change lives through the power of medicine and compassion. But her story didn't end there. Over the next few months, Lila worked tirelessly, setting up new research initiatives and working with hospitals around the world. She was no longer just a doctor performing surgeries. She was a leader in a movement that was changing the way healthcare was viewed, especially in underserved communities. The media caught wind of her work, and soon Lila became a household name. But she remained humble, never forgetting where she came from or the challenges she had faced along the way. She continued to be driven by the same passion that had fueled her as a child, helping others, changing lives, and leaving a legacy that would live on long after her. As Lila stood at the forefront of a medical revolution, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the streets of Gujarat to the halls of one of the most prestigious hospitals in New York, she had come a long way. And now, with the world at her feet, Lila Patel knew that her work was just beginning. The future was bright, and she was determined to make the most of every opportunity that came her way. In the years that followed, Lila continued to break barriers, to innovate, and to inspire. She had gone from a girl with nothing but dreams to a woman who had everything, but it was not wealth or fame that mattered. It was the power to change lives, to help those who needed it the most. And Lila knew that she was just getting started.